with the Denver Broncos to acquire wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. The Browns have had their eye on Jerry Jeudy since last year. A wide receiver is a position we've had our eye on for the Cleveland Browns this offseason, and it looks like they have added another weapon to their roster.
You guys know I live for these moments. I'm on 4 hours of sleep right now, and the very first huge trade of the NFL offseason's officially here. I'm anticipating an offseason that's reminiscent of the 2022 offseason, where we saw Tyreek Hill get traded, Devontae Adams getting traded, Tom Brady retiring and unretiring, Russell Wilson getting traded, Khalil Mack getting traded. So if you want to make sure you're up to date with the latest and greatest NFL news, make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all that out of the way, break! Look right over here, you'll see all of these wonderful human beings that have been able to make some money by playing Prize Picks. And I give away my picks for free each and every day on my Instagram at TheFlightMike and Snapchat at FlightMikeSnap. And right now they're hooking up my subscribers fat when you use my promo code FlightMike when you sign up for Prize Picks. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I owe you guys a legitimate Russell Wilson update because a lot has happened on that front. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily know if I could get to a Russell Wilson update today, so I'm gonna update you guys in this video. The latest we have on Russell Wilson is the Denver Broncos really want Russell Wilson to seek out a trade, and Russell Wilson has until the 13th to officially seek out that trade. According to Josina Anderson, Russell Wilson already had a great meeting in Pittsburgh so far. I was told that he sat with Steelers offensive coordinator Arthur Smith for hours and that he looked happy. I was also told Wilson did his homework, reaching out to some players in advance for source. This next part's hilarious. Mike Tomlin moves like the G in lasagna. So we'll see how much carryover there is after Russell Wilson retreats to his quarters. I mean, I think this is great information from one of the most talented journalists ever. I just felt like saying
space. Oh, by the way, guys, Mike Tomlin moves like the G in lasagna.
It was pretty funny, but Josina's awesome. Now, Russell Wilson did leave without signing, which means that he's probably still going to make his rounds. But if there's one thing that's for certain, it's that the Denver Broncos are currently undergoing a full-scale rebuild, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Sean Payton left the recently retooling New Orleans Saints to go to the Denver Broncos, who already had their problems, but are now in the midst of undergoing a full-scale rebuild and incurring a huge cap hit if they release Russell Wilson. But it seems like the Denver Broncos are already committed to this. One of their biggest investments in their offense came in the 2020 NFL Draft. Now, going into the 2020 NFL Draft, many scouts and analysts, particularly you, Mel Kiper, were calling this the deepest wide receiver draft class in recent memory. And if you look at it on paper, it makes sense. You had Henry Ruggs, who was the fastest wide receiver in this class, Jerry Jeudy, who was supposed to be the best route runner in this class, CeeDee Lamb, who was supposed to be the complete package and a jack of all trades, Justin Jefferson, who, well, is Justin freaking Jefferson, and then you had Brandon Ayuk get selected a few picks later. Then just a few picks later, you had T. Higgins. This is a draft class that fully lived up to its potential. But unfortunately, the first two picks, a pair of prolific teammates with the Alabama Crimson Tide, really had trouble finding themselves in the NFL. In the case of Henry Ruggs, he made a horrific mistake that ruined his life and the life of another family when he got behind the wheel, when he was absolutely plastered, and well, you guys know what happened after that, unfortunately. The sad thing was, Henry Ruggs was in the midst of a breakout year. But the case of Jerry Jeudy was a little bit more complicated. With Jerry Jeudy, he would have these incredible moments where he would absolutely carve up defensive backs, like what he did here against the Indianapolis Colts. But then Russell Wilson wouldn't get him the ball. Then there were moments where he would get wide open and his quarterback would get him the football, but he would drop the football. So you didn't really know if it was Jerry Jeudy that sucked or his circumstances that sucked. But at the end of the day, he had 4 seasons to prove himself to the Denver Broncos that he was capable of being a #1 wide receiver. And in all 4 of those seasons, he never had one season where he had over 1,000 receiving yards, although his first season with Russell Wilson showed some promise with 972 receiving yards. Now, again, during the last 2 seasons of his career with the Denver Broncos, things were very tumultuous for him to say the least. But it seems like a lot of people have given up on Jerry Jeudy, including Steve Smith Sr. when he said this about him earlier in the season.
For a short while ago, Broncos wide receiver Jerry Jeudy was walking by and Steve called out to him. and he got a different reaction.
I called out to him because on my podcast, Cut to It, I just talked about guys that maybe have not showed up in a way or in a manner. And so the word that I've used to describe him in the past was a jag, just a guy.
Just a guy.
And so when I saw him, he's playing well. I wanted to say to him face to face, like, hey, I know I said some things in the past I probably shouldn't have, and I'm sorry. That's what I wanted to say to him. His response, Mike Robb and Bucky, was ninja.
Ninja?
Yes, I'm using the word ninja. I'm just using the word ninja. I don't mess with you. And it was a curse word. And so I was like, all right. And then he repeated it. So I'll say it again. I'm sorry that I said you were a jag, just a guy who's an average wide receiver they use a first-round pick on that isn't doing anything. I hope today that you actually show up in a way that you haven't showed up in the last couple of years since they drafted you. So if you ever got a problem with Agent 89, I'm sorry for saying that you're an average wide receiver that they eventually will move on. And when teams call me and asking, should they trade for you, I will say no, don't trade for Jerry Jeudy because he's mentally unable to handle constructive criticism from people who watch specifically, can he be a wide receiver? He could be a wide receiver. He's a tier 3. Go back into the studio. I'm done now. Thank you.
And now it seems like the Denver Broncos have officially given up on Jerry Jeudy because according to Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport, we have a trade. The Denver Broncos and Cleveland Browns agreed to a deal today that will send wide receiver Jerry Jeudy to Cleveland in exchange for 2 draft picks, sources tell ESPN. Now, Cleveland made a run at Jeudy at last season's trade deadline. Now the Browns finally will get him once the trade is processed this week. For those of you guys that are wondering what the trade compensation was, it was really nothing. It was just a 5th round pick and a 6th round pick to the Denver Broncos. So why would the Broncos do this? Because it clears up cap space for the Denver Broncos. Let's break this down for you guys, man. From the Denver Broncos perspective, let's just call a spade a spade. It sucks whenever you have to do this. Anytime you select a player with the 15th overall pick in the 1st round of the NFL draft, and you had CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr. all get selected after him, it sucks. And the thing that sucks the most is maybe Jerry Jeudy's a solid wide receiver that was just placed in a bad situation. I mean, he had a brand new head coach with Nathaniel Hackett in 2022 with a brand new QB. He still almost had 1,000 yards receiving. And then this past year, he once again has a brand new head coach who gave up on his QB during the final weeks of the season. It's really difficult to really know if Jerry Jeudy is a solid wide receiver in the NFL. But in the case of the Denver Broncos, you're about to get hit so hard with the salary cap, and you clearly aren't going to sign Jerry Jeudy to a long-term contract, so you might as well give up on him. I would have liked to see the Denver Broncos make this trade, possibly at the trade deadline. I feel like the 5th and the 6th round pick could have turned into a 3rd or a 4th possibly, or maybe the trade market isn't there. This is just my own speculation. At the end of the day, at least you get something for a player that didn't pan out for you, but it definitely stings that you had much more talented wide receivers get selected after Jerry Jeudy and you didn't take them. In the case of the Denver Broncos, I understand why they did it. It's never a good feeling to have to do this. I will give them a C for this trade, honestly, and that's just because I don't feel like being extra mean today because it's already very difficult to be a Denver Broncos fan. But in the case of the Cleveland Browns, I have to admit, the only decision that they've made over the past 2 years that was a head scratcher for me was the trade for Deshaun Watson and then signing him to a fully guaranteed 5-year deal. And even that contract isn't aging that terribly, and it's not even the worst trade for a quarterback out of the last 2 years. The trade for Russell Wilson was. At least you're keeping your QB, even though Deshaun Watson hasn't really looked like Deshaun Watson in quite some time. By the way, Deshaun Watson likes this trade. He tweeted out a bunch of emojis like 15 minutes before the trade went down. I mean, you have Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and Elijah Moore as your wide receiver core, alongside Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford and David Njoku. Honestly, it's a very solid offense for the Cleveland Browns, and defensively, this team is stacked as well. If you have a healthy Deshaun Watson going into this season, then watch out for the Cleveland Browns. This is an A+ for the Cleveland Browns, who've already gotten Amari Cooper for a 5th round pick, and he turned out to be a gem. I'm still really upset as a Cowboy fan that we gave up on him, but this is a really well-built team. I give him an A+ for this trade. You're getting a former top 15 draft pick that's an excellent route runner. Who knows? Maybe Jerry Jeudy is a good wide receiver that was stuck in a bad position. At the very worst, this is a low-risk, high-reward type of situation, and maybe Jerry Jeudy emerges and you can move on from Amari Cooper eventually. There's just no downside to this trade. Jerry Jeudy is worth the potential potential of a 5th and a 6th round pick. So I give the Cleveland Browns an A+. I think this is a remarkable decision on their part, and I understand why the Denver Broncos had to do what they did. If you guys missed why the Denver Broncos had to do this, I explained it all in our last Russell Wilson video. I'll leave a link to that in the end screen. If you already caught that, make sure you check out our video on Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee getting into a war with each other. I'll leave both of those links in the end screen for you guys to check out. And aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.